tie a fly that is not mine, but it's integral to what we're going to be talking about tonight, about fishing spring creeks, some new methods for fishing spring creeks. How many of you have ever fished a spring creek? Oh, about half. How many of you who have not would like to? Somebody holler out why it is you haven't if you've not fished a spring creek.
Still new.
Okay, new.
It's tough.
It's what?
It's tough.
It's tough? Yeah, it is pretty tough. We're going to teach you a method that might simplify that for you a little bit. Bill, you were in my class, I think, at the Wasatch show, or in and out of my class. I did a class this last spring at the Wasatch show. Didn't have a whole lot of turnout, and that's okay. I'm not famous. Right next door, I think I had Mike Lawson talking about fishing somewhere. I can't even remember what it was. What's that?
I think he did the Yellowstone area.
But he was during the same time I was, and there's no competing with that. So.
But I had several people come out after the class that raved. So.
About which one?
Yours.
Thank you. I know they raved about Mike's, but once you see this, I hope you'll spread the word, and we can get the word out there. And maybe I can do it again this next year at the expo. Okay, I'm going to tell you what's called a Parasol Emerger. How many of you have seen one of those before? A couple of you. Okay. How many of you have fished them before? Wow. Okay. I use medium to light done macrame yarn for this. It's nylon, but it's a little finer than the stuff you'll find in the fly shops, the stuff you get for parasols or for dry fly posts and that kind of thing. It's a little bit finer texture, and so that's why I use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 7 strands that came out of this macrame piece that I found at the DI, unwound it, now I got these pieces. So I'm going to take my 22 caliber dubbing brush. I'm going to brush out those strands so they're all lined up together and not twisted around each other. And it looks like that. See how nice and neat those are? Now we'll take some 6-pound Maxima Ultra Green. 6 pound is 2X in the Maxima. We're going to take that and we'll take the yarn like that and lay it right over the top. See how I've done that? Can you see that?
You're above the camera.
Oh, shoot, sorry. Okay, can you see how I've done that? I've laid the yarn over the top of the 2X. I'm going to take that and pull the come on, the 2X stuff together like that, and then I'll pull the macrame yarn over like that. Now can you see that, how I've done that? The macrame yarn's folded over top of the 2X material, or the 2X material is folded over the top of the macrame yarn. But you see I'm holding both ends of the 2X in one hand, both sides of the macrame in the other hand. And what I'll do now is I'll take this, come on, lost it again. I want to get rid of all those macrame pieces that are floating. We'll take this and we'll spin that like that. Let me get it in the other hand. It's easier to work. So we're just going to spin that macrame back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until it gets really tight there at the end. And then I'm going to spin that about 6 times. And once I've done that, You're going to take the tag end. Now imagine with me, if you will, this is a hook eye, the macrame. This is your tippet material. And you're going to tie an improved clinch knot. That's all we're going to do here in that macrame is, so we're going to go through that V shape right there, that V shape right there, we're going to go through it. Now if I was to stop there, tighten it up, that would be a clinch knot, right? Clinch knot doesn't work on this. You got to have the improved, so we'll fold it over one more time, take it through, get it wet, pull it tight, and then I'm actually going to pull on that quite tightly with my fingernails to get it right up tight against that macrame material. Trim the tag end. Now, here's another reason to have sharp scissors with this job, is because you want to cut this and you want to do it in one shot. So now, I've got that all, and you can see the hinge effect. You don't want the hinge effect. Can you see the V? And that's where the nylon tippet material goes around it and holds it together. You don't want that V, and so you got to get rid of that. So we're going to take that and put it back down on my vise stand, and we're going to brush that out again. And we're going to keep spinning that as we brush that out. What I'm trying to do is get all those fibers so they're not lined up in that V shape from where the nylon material wrapped around it. Now you see it's kind of like a crafter's, about a third size of a crafter's, what do they call them, when the pom-pom, thank you. I knew one of the ladies would know that. So now, you're going to spin that together real tight, again, grab it just with the tips of my thumb and finger, like that, and I'm going to cut that off to where it's about 1/4 of an inch long. Once again, really sharp scissors are required because you just want one snip. Now you're going to spin it around. If you notice there's a few loose ends or pointy ends, we're just going to spin it around and get that cut off. So now we've got a parasol puff that's going to go onto a fly. Okay? I'll make these up dozens at a time. Cut that off, and so I've just got that parasol puff. Now we're going to go and tie my favorite pattern that I use for the Parasol Emerger, and that would be a pheasant tail.
Kelly?
Yeah.
Do you vary the colors on those puffs at all?
I don't. Now, in the past, did everybody hear the question? Do I vary the colors on the puffs at all? I've done pink ones, I've done orange ones, I've done white ones, I've done black ones, I've done blue ones. I had an entomologist friend of mine say when fish look up and they see blue, they won't think anything of it. Well, the problem is the reflection off the surface of the water makes it disappear too from up above. So blue doesn't work.
Would it benefit you at all to use UV by any chance?
Say again?
Would it benefit you at all to use UV by any chance?
UV?
Ultraviolet?
No, I don't believe so. The fish would probably see it better, but I don't. Here's the deal. For me, this color, I can see, I can put out my full line. I put out a 90-foot fly line with leader on it, and I can see this on the surface. Okay? That's just me. That's my eyes. Some guys can see white better, but you get a sparkly day, guess what? The white's gone. Now on a sparkly day, if you had black, sometimes you can see that a little better. But this is my go-to color for, sorry, I keep going too high, don't I? This is my go-to color for me to be able to see it. And I varied it to the orange, the pinks, the bright colors. I can't see them. This one I can see at distance. And that's why, so I have experimented with them. I also use 2X for this post. There's a reason for that. There's guys that have done these with tying thread. This isn't a new concept, the dandelion fly. A few different guys have had iterations of this that they've done. This is one that was done by Leeson and Schollmeyer. And they got in a whole bunch of hot water when they published the article because they said it was an original type pattern, which it was for them. This tying it this way was original for them, but somebody talked about the dandelion and some other flies and called them liars, and they had to do a retraction and say sorry, we understand. But the whole point was this was their original idea. The post, though, is critical. If you use lighter, it flops over, it doesn't stand upright, and it wraps around the leader. If you use stiffer, you can't tie it on some of the hooks, the smaller hooks that you tie. The 2X works perfect, keeps it standing up the way it's supposed to and oriented the way it's supposed to. So now we're going to tie this in a, did that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now we're going to tie this in a pheasant tail pattern. I'm going to use a Dairiki 125 in a size 14. I'm just going to use black thread for this. Remember the sharp scissors. Okay. We'll take some pheasant tails first. We'll get about 5 or 6. Everybody get a chance to see the articulated booty shaker? Anybody else need to see it? We good? Okay. Now, if you saw it, what did you think?
Loved it, man.
It's amazing.
Thanks. Okay, so 5 or 6 pheasant tail fibers. These are dyed yellow. I like this color combination for pheasant tails. So I'm going to tie that in. I don't tie long tails. You know, the original pheasant tail nymph looked nothing like what we tie today. So I don't call this anything original to me either, but this is really a great pattern. Pheasant tail nymphs will catch fish under trout and other fish under most circumstances, most of the time. And this tie that I do, I'll show you the next fly that I'll tie will be my, also not my original. You'll see some of my original flies besides the booty shake. You'll see some of my original flies in the presentation that we tie for Spring Creeks. But the other one is just a pheasant tail that I've adapted with some different materials and tying methods. So now we're going to take the parasol puff.
What did you just tie in there?
Oh, sorry. I tied in a piece of chartreuse wire for a wire rib over the pheasant tail material. Somebody's going to ask, why chartreuse?
What size?
This is a small size. You don't need bigger for a size 14 hook. Small size is just right. In fact, I can use a small size on a 16 hook. You go below a 16, you want to get extra small. Don't use the heavier brassy size unless you're getting 12 or above. Okay. So, why chartreuse? I catch more fish with chartreuse. And I use it in a lot of my patterns. You'll see it. By the way, I've got some cards up here, recipe cards with detailed recipes and pictures, so you know what they're supposed to look like when you're done. You're welcome to come and get these tonight and take those with you, okay? But now, we're going to tie a mayfly. A mayfly, when it emerges, it's going to come up and it's going to angle about like that. Yeah, we're just, can everybody see that? We're going to angle about just like that. We're going to hit their thorax against the surface film, and they're going to split out of that thorax and emerge through the surface film as they split out of that thorax, crawl up on top, dry their wings, fly away if a fish doesn't eat them. Caddisfly is going to do about the same thing, but a midge is going to come up about this orientation, a little bit of an angle. In fact, some midges come up and cup and attach at both ends, but they'll still emerge out of their head, and that's what it is. And that's so. If I'm tying a midge pattern, I'm going to tie this parasol puff right behind the hook eye at just about an angle like that, so it orients that nymph right like that under the surface film. But if it's a mayfly like this is, I'm going to tie it right where the abdomen and the thorax meet, right behind the wing case, so that it orients this fly the right way in the surface film. That's what we're going to do here. Is, since I'm going to tie a mayfly, a pheasant tail nymph, we're going to tie that about 1/4 of an inch, maybe 3/8 of an inch long, and then tie that down clear back to where the pheasant tails were tied in. I'm going to trim that off. Now what I'll do is I'll grab the wire, the pheasant tails, and I'll wrap over the stub of the parasol, and now I'm going to wrap over the top of those, down a few wraps past where I tied in the pheasant tails, and there's a reason for that. How many of you have seen the pheasant tails break off when you've used them? It's because when you tie those in tight around one spot you've tied them in tight, you've pinched them, and eventually they're going to break. So by doing what I just did, and I've tied all my materials in, and then I wrap my thread back just a little bit over top, I've actually formed a sheath over all that, and now I've protected those pheasant tails. Good trick and tip to know when you're tying any type of tails like that, okay? So, next thing, I'm not going to stand up the parasol yet. I got some other things I've got to do here. First, we want to wrap our pheasant tails. As you notice, I've got this fancy rotary vise that serves to let me turn the fly around so I can see how I've done on the bottom. And I don't usually use it to wrap materials, so that's just my choice. And I'll wrap those all the way up to the hook eye. Now we'll take the wire and rib that about 6 or 7 times, and we'll stop that right behind where the parasol post is. Take my thread right back there, catch that wire underneath, and then I'll wrap my thread around the wire almost clear up to the hook eye. That keeps things even, so you don't have big bumps and bulges in certain areas. Okay, so now we need to put something in there for a wing case. And in this case, even though they probably won't see the flash except in the reflection, the surface, we'll take some. By the way, if you're still using pearl mylar for flashbacks, you need to change. This is just my personal opinion. This is called a Mirage tinsel made by UTC in an opal color. It's actually a mirror finish. I don't know if you can see that. It's a lot shinier than your pearl. This is great stuff, and I can do a lot of different stuff with this material. But we're going to do this as a wing case. So we'll tie that right down on top of the thorax area, and take my thread right back to where the wing post is. Now, a little trick with some peacock herl. I'll just grab a couple. We'll grab those by the tips, and when I grab those by the tips, then I'll sweep everything back so they stand out straight off of the shank there of the feather fiber, and then I'll cut off about the first inch to inch and a half. Those are really brittle up there at the end. I've seen a lot of guys that tie their peacock still in by the butts, and that's the stiffest part, and I think they think that that's going to make it stronger by doing that, but what it really does is make it weaker, because those butts are so stiff they'll break And even if you don't do anything, if you tie them in by the tips, they'll still break a lot easier if you don't do what I'm going to show you. So I'm just going to lay those to the side of the thorax area, wrap my thread back to where the flashback starts. Now I'm going to take my 2 pieces of herl, my single piece of thread, and take my hackle pliers. I like these electronics grabbers for hackle pliers. I've never had a pair of English hackle pliers that have held consistently. They either slide out or they break off or whatever. So I'm going to take those, and I got the 2 herls and the 1 piece of thread, and I'm going to grab all of those together just like that. Okay? Now, first thing I'm going to do is trim off those butts of the peacock. I'll hold on to my hackle pliers while I stretch the thread so I can have enough to come back, and I'm going to reattach that back up here on the hook shank. So now I've got 2 pieces of thread, 2 peacock herls, and I'm going to spin those. There's some ways, you know, guys will just wrap that around the thread by hand. I'm going to spin those counterclockwise. Why counterclockwise? Because as you go over the hook shank, as you wrap stuff, that's the way it spins. You don't want it getting looser. You want it staying tight. And so by doing it counterclockwise, that stays tight. So now I'm going to take 1 wrap around, 1 wrap behind that first one. And on this, because it's such a small space because of all the materials, I'm just going to take that 1 last wrap. So I've only got 3 wraps of that doubled over herl. But this herl is bomb proof, okay? A tooth catches that and they're not going to break or split or whatever. It's bomb proof, it really is. It's there to stay because it's basically what you've formed is a peacock chenille, natural peacock chenille. And so it's a great way to do that. Now comes one of my favorite things that I learned years ago, and I can't tell you where I learned it, but I learned it, and so I'm going to share it with you tonight. And this is how to put legs on nymphs. Really good looking legs on nymphs. This is, by the way, just an India hen saddle. And when you're using a hen saddle, they're rounded feathers. And I'm just going to grab one of those that's got some, they're usually mottled, and so they got some good color, look like insects, and I'll grab that by the very tip, and I'll sweep everything back beyond that, so that I've got an even number, top and bottom there, kind of an X right there. Can everybody see that? Is that clear? And where that's at, I don't have an even number. Thank you. I need to look in the camera and I can, there we go. There, that looks better, doesn't it?
Yes.
Okay. I'm just going to snip that out. I don't need it anymore. Now I'll grab it by the stem and I will sweep forward about a dozen or so on each side. So once again, I've got an even number, top and bottom. So I got bare stem right in the middle. And now what I've got is X marks the spot, and where that X is, where that bare stem is, I'm going to lay that right behind the hook eye, and I'll take 1, 2 soft wraps. I don't want to pull this hard yet because we're going to adjust the hen saddle. What I'll do is I'll put my thumb on top, I'll grab the stem with my right hand, and while I pull with my right hand, I'll guide that with my left thumb to forward. And what I'm trying to accomplish here is some legs. I split out that one piece so that I'd have that V shape in there. Then I'll pull my flashback over the top through that V notch that I achieved by cutting out the tip of that feather. 2 good solid wraps. I'll even pull hard on that. You see how that flashback got real shiny and tight? That's by putting a couple of good hard wraps and then pulling on that. flashback, so it really pulls it under that thread and pulls it tight. So now we're going to lift everything up. I'm going to take 1, 2 wraps. Now this is an important step. I'll just take one back over, because how many of you have got to the end of the fly and you're well, the reason I do the legs like this, you see them? Kind of cool, huh? Okay, equal amount on each side. See, we used to, you take a clump off of a feather and you tie those in one side, and then you take another clump off a feather and tie those on the other side, and one side's too long and one side has more than the other. And well, in this way, you know, you've got just about exactly the same amount on each side, and they're pretty much the same length on each side. But especially doing it the other way, if you come to this point and you bump your thread like that, what happens? It all comes apart, doesn't it? That's why I lifted everything up and put 2 wraps right there. Those are safety wraps, and those keep everything in place so they don't come up when you pop it like that. So now I took 2 wraps over the top. I'm going to take my scissors in there real tight, clip off the rest of that feather. I haven't trimmed my wing case yet. We're going to finish this off with 3 sets of double half hitches, form a small head with it. Now all you need to do with this is touch it with your scissors, and it's gone. Now we'll get anytime I put mylar on a under thread, you think you've done the thread wraps really tight, you get to the fishing it and the thread wraps get wet and they stretch. And how many of you had the mylar do this? And you got that flashback standing up straight. Always, always, always just put a little drop of cement right there on those threads. It keeps that mylar where it ought to be for as long as it ought to be there, until too many fish tear the fly apart. Now, we just position that back up where it ought to be. Little angle there. I pull my wings down for the legs. What do you think? That's a Parasol Emerger.